So when we have a note on any instrument, there are four basic things to consider: the pitch, the volume, the value and the tone. The pitch is obviously how high or how low the note is. The volume is how loud it is. The value is how long the note lasts for, and the tone is the quality of the sound, the texture of the sound. On the M8, the pitch is controlled by this MIDI note that we enter in under the note column. The volume is in the next column. How long the note lasts depends on whether we put in an off or a kill command somewhere in this effects 1, 2 or 3 column, because that will stop the note from ringing. If it's an off command, that will trigger the downward ramp of the release. If we put a kill command in, that stops the sound dead. The final thing, the tone, is where the synthesis comes in. This is where we go into the synthesizers and we tweak the parameters to shape the sound into what we want. And that's what I'm going to be dealing with in this video and probably some subsequent ones. You may have had your M8 for a few weeks now and be wanting to make up your own sounds using the synthesizers. Of course, you could just rely on the sampler instruments, which is what I did first of all, and never bother with the built-in synthesizers. That would be a shame, as the 4 built-in synths offer a wide palette of sounds. With just a bit of know-how, some very nice sounds can be coaxed out of them. The thing with synthesizers is don't be afraid to try things out. You learn an awful lot by doing just that, and happy accidents occur and you'll come up with some amazing sounds, and you won't really know what you're doing perhaps, but that doesn't matter. Once you've got the sound you like, you can save it and you can probably learn from the process. So let's start with the Wavsynth or the Wavsynth, and this is a wavetable synthesizer. Now in this particular song I've just got one chain. If I go into it, I've got one phrase, and in that phrase I've got a single note, the C5. So if I go into instrument 10, which goes with phrase 10 and chain 10, you will see that I have a Wavsynth installed here, and I've got a sound here that I've called simple, which is a saw shape. Now in this instrument you've got loads of shapes. If I just scroll through them, you've got loads of different pulses. You've got the saw, triangle, sine, loads and loads of them, but we're going to use a saw wave, a nice simple sound. So if I go to the pattern, you can see I've got this single note, and if I play this, you'll hear what happens. It's a very boring sound that plays all the way through the phrase. So obviously that's not a lot of use. So in the instrument here, you can see that it's a saw wave, and you've got all these parameters. Now parameters, if you don't know that word, it just means things you can twiddle to make the sound change. Okay, so don't worry about that too much. I've already done a few things here. I've turned the amp up, so I've made it a bit louder than it would have been. I've turned the dry signal up, so that's also another volume control. I've added a bit of chorus and a bit of reverb, and I've put a low pass filter on it, but I've turned that low pass filter down to 5B. If I turn that all the way up to FF, you can hear you've got a much sharper sound now, but I've turned that down for a reason. The resonance I've put on 30. Okay, so this is just a start. Now to do any serious work, you've got to go up a page to the mods page for this instrument. So instrument mods 10. You've got 4 modulators, modulator 1, 2, 3 and 4. And I've got them all turned off at the moment, but if I go to the top one here and I put it to volume, so destination, the destination of the modulator is 01, volume. So what we're doing here, well, we've got an ADSR envelope, which is an attack, decay, sustain and release envelope, one of these. So with this type of envelope, what happens is you press the note, or the sequence that plays the note, you have this attack ramp as the sound goes up to the loudest possible volume, and then it drops down with the decay ramp to the sustain volume. Now if you were actually physically playing a keyboard, this would be the volume you'd have with your finger still on the key. And then here you take your finger off the key where it says note off, and then the release ramp would come into play as the note drops down to the minimum volume, sort of off if you like. So from left to right is time. So the note is played, it goes up to the top of the attack ramp to its maximum volume, drops down the decay ramp to the sustain volume while you've got your finger on the key. So you can have two different volumes here. You can have this initial volume and then the sustain volume, and then when you take your finger off the key, it slowly goes down to 0. This is just a general shape for one of these envelopes. You could have an immediate attack where there's no gap at all from where you play the note to where you get maximum volume, and you could have no drop down to the sustain volume. The sustain volume could be all the way up here, so no change in volume at all between these 2 points, and you could have an immediate release. So this is the whole point. The envelope shapes the sound, and it really helps us to get the sound we want. So with my envelope here, I've got an immediate attack, I've got the decay of 50, I've got the sustain volume of 90, and I've got a release of 93, so a fairly slow release. Let's go to the phrase page. If I press play, you can hear that envelope isn't working, because the problem is, in the real world, if I was playing a note on my keyboard, I would lift my finger off the note, off the key if you like, and the release ramp would kick in. But of course, a sequencer hasn't got a finger on the note, so we need to do something about that. On our phrase here, we've got to put in an off command. That's the same as you taking your finger off the keyboard. So if we do it round about here in effects 1, if I hold edit and up, it'll bring all the list of effects commands up, and I'm looking for off, and it's down here. When I play the note now, when it gets to this step 5, the release ramp will kick in. Can you hear how it fades away there? Whereas before, if I take that out, it just keeps going. So we want that in there, don't we? So that is our volume envelope working perfectly. So we could put another note in down here. Let's put it in on step 8. Let's put a D sharp 5, which will give us a kind of a C minor run, C to D sharp 5 or C to E flat. And we'll put another off command in down here, because otherwise we won't have our envelope working. So now we've got two notes playing with the envelopes working. This envelope that I've set here in modulator 1. So it's an ADSR envelope, destination is volume, so we've got immediate attack, decay, sustain, release, all set. And we've got two notes with envelopes working perfectly. So that's brilliant. But it's a bit of a dull sound, isn't it? So let's do something about that. Let's go back to our mods page. In modulator 2, I've already set this to an LFO, or a low frequency oscillator, and we'll set the destination to cutoff. So what this is going to do, it's going to make the cutoff filter open, and I've set the amount to full on, and the trig down here I've set to re-trig. So if there's a new note in a phrase, which there is, we've got two notes, haven't we, then the new note will set this in motion again. Let's hear what we've got now. Oh, it's a bit more interesting, isn't it? Now this off command that I've put in, when the sequencer sees that, then the release cycle is triggered, so the note goes down to 0. But if I have a kill command in there instead, that's something different. It's similar, but it's different. What that does is it kills the sound dead. There's no slow release down to 0. So let's just change these to kills. Up here on the top row of the sequencer, and we'll do the same here. Now let's listen. Apart from the reverb trail that we hear, the sound is stopping dead, isn't it? So if we put the off command in again, then now we get that lovely natural release. So there is a difference between off and kill, and normally off is preferable, but sometimes you'd want to stop it dead with the kill command. Now the cutoff has been turned down to 5B, which is a hexadecimal value. You can see from the strip to the right of that it's about a third of the way along, a third of the way open if you like, And the reason we don't have it fully open is if we look at the mods page up here, that's the page above, and if we look at mod 2, which is the LFO, which is operating the cutoff frequency, if that cutoff on the other page is full up, then this LFO can't do any work. It can't open something that's already open. So now when we play it, the LFO can open that filter, and you can see that dot moving as it does just that. Now, on the mods page, you'll see on this modulator 2, this LFO that I'm using, I've set the frequency to 10, which is a nice sort of steady pulse. But if I bring that right the way down to 01, like this, I get that very interesting tremolo effect, fast tremolo effect, because that filter is opening and closing really, really quickly. If I bring that up to say 4, I get this nice weeb, 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 weeb sound. So the lower the number, the faster the pulsing. If I take it up to 10 again, you can hear the pulsing is slower. Let's take it down even further. Something like this. So you see 04 is fairly quick, but it's slower than 01. Let's turn to modulator 3 now, and it's got an LFO set on it, and let's make the destination the pitch. Second one along, press play. You can hear a slight vibrato because the frequency is set to 02. If I bring that down to 01, have a listen to the difference. A bit faster, the wobble. If I turn that up a bit more. Sounds a bit drunk, doesn't it? Because it's really wobbling around. That pitch is really wobbling around. So maybe 02 is a good setting. If we turn that off again, that destination, it's gone, you see. So you can have an LFO on the pitch as well as the cutoff. All kinds of things can be modulated. So if we say we're modulating something, we're changing something with something else, rather using an LFO or an envelope to do the changing of the parameter. So in a short space of time there, I've created several quite reasonable and useful sounds. Now, a very important point is to, once you've got something you like, go to your main instrument page and save it. Now, I've saved this as simple. So first of all, you've got to name it, okay? I've called this simple, but if you wanted to change the name, you press edit with the cursor on the first letter of the name, and you could change the name, and then you could save it. And if you go to save it, it saves it to, well, it's set to instruments because that's where I saved to last, and I'd probably save it in the synth folder, and then you've got the name. So if I go to the load menu here up the top, press edit and go in there and go down to synth. And all these are synth sounds that have been saved. Some are factory ones, some are ones that I put in. These last few are ones that I put in. So I could load in another one here. Let's put in simple tremolo. And that's loaded in this one with this 01 frequency on the cutoff. See? Saving sounds very important, and saving instruments is very important, so you can use them in other projects. Otherwise you've got to load up that project, find that sound, it's a long and convoluted business. If you save a project, obviously it saves everything within it, all the chains and the phrases and the instruments and the sounds you've got. But obviously it's very handy to have those sounds, those synth sounds, saved separately so you can call them up into other projects very easily. So that was the Wavsynth. Let's look at another one of the synths that's built in, the Hypersynth. We'll load this helicopter song in. Now on this mods page for this instrument, you'll see that mod 2, the LFO is set to pan and the frequency is 0F, so you can see the dot moving around there as the sound pans around from one speaker to the other. Let's just turn this pan off for a moment. Let's change this frequency here. It's not so. That's a lovely whooshing sound that we've got the cutoff opening here at a frequency of 10. Let's look on the main page and we've got all kinds of things we can change. You can see that when the synth's playing, you've got these three dots because we have on the first note of the chord we've got this 0 0, which is the root note, and then the second note of the chord is 0 3, which is the minor third, which in this case is an E flat, and on the third note we've got 0 7, which is the G, which is 7 semitones above the root note. So 0 0 is the C in the key of C, 0 3 is E flat, the minor third, and 0 7 is the G, the fifth of the chord. So we've got a C minor chord here, and we've got extra root notes here to fatten it up, although we can turn those off if we like. We've got some parameters down here. We've got the shift, the swarm. The swarm is a kind of a fattening up of things. If I take that out, you'll hear it's a lot different. It's a lot drier, isn't it? If we take it back up to 0F, you'll hear it's a much warmer, fatter sound. A bit like a chorus. The width is the stereo width. The sub-oscillator is very interesting. 80 is the off position, because if you go to the far right you get a note which is an octave below the root note, like this. And if we go the other way to the far left, we get a note which is 2 octaves below the root note. Very low note. Just for the moment we'll turn this off. And off is the middle position, which is 80. The filter is set to low pass, the typical cut-off frequency that most people know, and the resonance is set at DF, which is pretty high, and this just emphasises that cut-off point. Remember I mentioned earlier about bringing the cut-off down so that the LFO has got something to work with. If you look at mod 1, LFO set to cut-off, and there it can really open up that filter because it's closed on the main page. See? I bring it all the way up, nothing happens because the filter is already open, you see. So in this instance I'm going to bring that all the way down. At the moment this is named helicopter, but I've changed it so much I'm going to change the name and save it. So we'll call it whoosh. Now we've named it, we're going to save it, so go over to save, and it says save to instrument synth, which is fine. Put it in there. Now if we wanted to load that back in, go to load, drop all the way down. It's the newest one we've got there, whoosh. Other parameters there we've got the amp set to 10, which is just a bit of extra volume, and the dry set to CO, so we've turned that up a bit. Got a bit of chorus, a bit of reverb. It's a good sound, isn't it? Right, very briefly today I'm just going to show you a little bit of the Macrosynth. The Macrosynth is a modular, it's a synth modular, and there are 44 different models in this synth, including the amazing vowel, which I used in my vowel movement, so I'm going to check that out if you haven't heard that. That's great fun. So I'm using this saw swarm shape, and I've set the timbre and colour and the filter and the amp, and I've added the chorus and delay and reverb. Sounds pretty good. If I go to the mods page, I've got a volume envelope up here. Okay, I've got a cut-off envelope here, and over here I've got LFOs operating the timbre, or timbre if you prefer the pronunciation, and the colour. The timbre and the colour, just other parameters that change the sound, and you can mess around with those to your heart's content, and it sounds like this. For some reason it made me think of the Titanic in the fog, so I called it Titanic. If I go down to the instrument page, you can see I saved it as saw Titanic, so it reminded me that it was a saw wave. Notice the off command there on step 5, because if you don't have that, it's just going to go on and on and on. Let's just show you that on another track. If I go to track 2 here and go into this phrase here, now there's no off command here. Hear what happens. It just keeps going. And don't forget that off command is the equivalent of you taking your finger off the key on your keyboard. I've got this phrase here with the note in it, and I've got this one here with no note in it. So let's see what happens if I play the chain. It just keeps ploughing through the next phrase because there's no note off command. So that's why it's very important to have this note off command, so that the release can be triggered in the volume envelope, in the ADSR envelope. Let's just show you that on this one here. The one up the top. When it sees that off command, it triggers this release of 90, and it takes that long to go down. If I take this all the way down, it's immediate, you see? And again, with the off taken out, it just keeps going. So that was something I had to find for myself on the internet. I couldn't really find that anywhere, and it was causing me a bit of distress. And I was thinking, well, you know, how does the sequencer know when the note's going to stop? And that's the answer. So that off command there is very, very useful, very important, and it's in the sequencer effects, bottom row, third one along. I'm no brilliant synthesist, I don't know that much. There's loads of people with M8s on YouTube that I've seen who know tons of stuff about synthesis. I don't, but I know enough to get by, and maybe this will be useful for you if you're trying to create your own sounds. This is just to, you know, get your toe in the water, just to get you trying things like ADSRs and LFOs. So I hope very much that you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and you'll see me in my next one.